Hello everyone, welcome to the 10th video lecture of class 8 science. So we are dealing with our second unit, that is forces and pressure. So in this video lecture we will be studying about the advantages of friction, disadvantages of friction and increasing and decreasing of friction. So in the previous class we have we have learned friction in detail. So just to recall the things, friction is the force that opposes the motion of an object. We have studied that always friction will be acting opposite to the the motion of an object. It slows down or prevents the motion of a body. Friction always opposes the motion and produces heat. In the case of effects of friction, we have learned that the friction will slows down the moment, one thing. Another thing is it will produce heat, and for that case we learned an example of matchbox, right, where the fire will be generated in the case of striking a matchstick due to the friction. Okay, then friction is caused by irregularities of the surfaces which are in contact. So in the case of how the friction will be created, so while studying that we even studied due to the dissimilarities, okay, of the surface which is not smooth or polished. So what happens when two such surfaces are in contact? So the friction will be created. Then friction depends upon nature of the surface, mass of the body, that is nothing but the weight of the body, and also one more thing, right? What is it? Nature of the surface, area of the surface of contact, and then weight of the body. These three things on which the friction depends. Then friction is classified into two types, static friction and the kinetic friction. The kinetic friction can be further divided into rolling friction and sliding friction. So these are all the things we have studied in the previous lecture. So in this, we'll be starting with the advantages of friction. So if you remember, we said the friction is something which opposes the motion, which creates the heat, which that means it slows down the motion, all those things. But this friction is even though it has got many disadvantages, it is advantages in many cases. In our day-to-day life, the friction plays a major role. So let us see one by one. So here, friction is a necessity in most of our day-to-day activities. It is desirable in most situations of our daily life. First one is we can hold any object in our hand due to the friction. So, for example, if the object is dipped in oil, it becomes very difficult to hold it. Why? Because there is an absence of friction. The surface becomes, one of the surface becomes very smooth because of the oil on it, right? So it becomes very smooth. The surface becomes very smooth. So what happens? It becomes very difficult to hold it. That means the friction decreases. As the friction decreases, the difficulty of holding increases. Okay, then the next thing, if you see, we can walk on the road because of friction. The footwear and the ground help us to walk without slipping. Okay, so it is very easy to walk on any rough surface than on the smooth surface. For example, we all have seen the slipping of a boy or a man when he steps on a banana peel in the previous class, right? Similarly, if you see in our day-to-day life, any surface which is having some oil or any polished surface, it becomes very difficult to walk on it. But in the case of rough surface, it is quite easy to walk on, right, because of the presence of friction there. The writing becomes easy with a pen on paper, which is also due to friction. Automobiles can move safely due to friction between the tires and the road. Brakes can be applied due to the frictional resistance on the brake shoes. So we all know that when the in the case of automobiles, when we apply brakes, it becomes the body comes to rest, right? That is also due to a friction between the road and the vehicle. We are able to light a matchstick, sew clothes, tie a knot, or fix a nail in the wall because of friction. So, these are all very much important things or the actions in our day to day life. If these things are not going well, it becomes very difficult to live on this earth. So, for all those things, friction is very much essential. Even though the friction has got many disadvantages, it plays a major role in our day to day life. Okay, now let us look into the major disadvantages of friction. Friction wears out the surfaces rubbing with each other, like screws and gears in machines or soles of your shoes, right? And even in the case of vehicles, the tires, which will be continuously running on the road, due to the rubbing of tires on the road, what happens? There will be wear and tear, which we need to overcome by replacing the tire frequently, right? When there is a damage or a wear and tear due to the friction between tire and the road, we need to change the tires regularly. Okay, to overcome the friction, an excess amount of effort has to be given to operate a machine. So we all know that when there is a friction, we can hear a an irritating kind of sound. When two things are rubbing each other, there will be lot of noise created. So what we usually we do, we go for decreasing the friction by applying some oil. Even in your sewing machine also, continuously we need to oil the things, machines, all the machine for that matter, we need to oil it, we need to go for maintenance. It becomes very costly, right? An excess amount of effort. One thing is it is expensive, another thing is lot of effort is needed to overcome the friction in the machineries. Friction produces heat which causes physical damages to the machines. So this, because of this heat produced due to the friction, what happens, there is a huge damage to the machineries, so which will cause a large amount of loss to us. So this friction is, on one hand it has got major advantages, on the other hand it has got same amount of disadvantages. Though it is giving a negative effect in most of our day-to-day life, friction helps us to make our life easy. So therefore the friction is called as necessary evil, an evil which is very much important, an evil which is very much necessary in our day to day life. Okay, so in the last class, we have studied that the friction depends upon area of contact, weight of an object, nature of the surface. These things we have studied. So now, when to increase or to decrease the friction, we need to look upon these things. In the case of increasing or decreasing the friction, area of contact. Friction can be increased by increasing the area of contact. So we have studied, as the area of contact increases, the friction also increases. For example, sumo players, kabaddi players rub their hands with mud to get a better grip. Football shoes are having soles with many projections for providing a stronger grip with the ground. So these are the things coming under area of contact, which helps in increasing the friction. The next thing is using lubricants. So here this is a case where we need to decrease the friction. Okay, some of the cases like in machineries, we need to decrease the friction so that there is no much damage to the machine. A substance which reduces the frictional force is called as a lubricant. For example, grease, coconut oil, graphite, castor oil, etc. The lubricants fill up the gaps in the irregular spaces between the bodies in contact. This provides a smooth layer, thus preventing a direct contact between the rough surfaces. So what happens whenever you apply or put some oil on the rough surfaces? So what happens? It will avoid the two rough surfaces to coming into contact. In between the two rough surfaces, what happens? This oil comes into picture, which indeed reduces the friction. So the lubricant is a substance which reduces the friction. Okay, the lubricants are nothing but the oils, grease, all those things. Okay, which we use in machines to reduce the friction. Using the ball bearings, we have studied in the case of kinetic friction, there are two types, that is sliding friction and the rolling friction. And using your book and the pencil, even we studied that um, rolling friction is lesser than the sliding friction. So that is one way we can reduce the friction. Wherever we have any sliding things, there we can introduce something which is rotating, rolling, so that the friction reduces. So that is what is used in many of the machines. Since the rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, sliding is replaced by rolling with the usage of ball bearings. Okay, so in most of the machines we have seen, we will see this ball bearings where small balls will be inserted, which will help in easy movement of the machines. You can see the lead shots in the bearings of a cycle hub. Ball bearings are used in many machines to reduce the friction. So these are the two methods we use to reduce the friction. The first one was a method used to increase the friction. Okay, so this was about the friction, decreasing and increasing, advantages and disadvantages. So this completes your lesson. So in the next Monday we'll be having a small test of 50 marks, wherein you will have questions from first chapter and the second chapter, 25 questions from the first chapter and the 25 questions from the this chapter, that is forces and pressure. So the questions will be pure, all the questions will be multiple choice, all are MCQ, where you will be given with one questions and four options. You need to choose the correct one answer to that. So the question paper will be uh, in Google form, so wherein a link will be sent to you, which you need to open and write your name, and you can start opting for the correct option, and at the end you need to submit it. Okay, so it will be in Google form. More about this, you can just go through Google it, or you for that we will be having one small mock test also, where before the actual test we can go for the mock test, so that you will be aware of what actually the Google form is. Okay, so that's it. Please go through the previous chapter and this chapter also. Do all the exercises. All the questions will be from the textbook itself, the text. So go through the textbook thoroughly. So I hope this small test will help you in learning the things better. So that's it for the day. Thank you.